First Story, by Robert Anderson. I've always found the countryside to be a peaceful retreat from the chaos of the city. But a few years back, I had an experience in a remote cornfield that shattered that perception forever. It was a warm summer afternoon, and I had decided to take a leisurely drive through the scenic landscapes of Iowa. The endless fields of corn were a sight to behold, their rustling leaves and golden hues stretching as far as the eye could see. I had driven deep into the heart of the countryside, far from any major town, enjoying the tranquility of the open road. As I cruised along the winding country lanes, I noticed a weathered sign for a farm up ahead. Curiosity piqued, I decided to take a detour and see what this place had to offer. The sign read Milton Farm, with a faded image of a scarecrow. It was a charming yet eerie image, but I thought nothing of it at the time. I turned onto a gravel road, following it for what felt like miles until I reached the entrance of Milton Farm. The place had an old-world charm, with a rustic farmhouse, barns, and of course, a vast cornfield stretching out behind it. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape. I parked my car and stepped out, the crunch of gravel beneath my feet the only sound in the stillness. The farmhouse appeared deserted, and I could hear faint, eerie creaking sounds coming from the cornfield. Curiosity overcame me, and I decided to investigate. As I entered the cornfield, I was immediately struck by the height of the cornstalks. They loomed over me, casting the entire area in a shadowy darkness. The rustling of leaves grew louder, and I felt a growing sense of unease. I thought perhaps there were workers tending to the crops, but I saw no one. The unease turned to dread as I ventured further into the field. That's when I noticed something peculiar. The cornstalks seemed to be arranged in a labyrinthine pattern, forming intricate, winding pathways. It was as though the cornfield itself was trying to lead me deeper into its maze. I hesitated for a moment, the fear of becoming lost in the maze of corn clawing at me. But a strange compulsion urged me on. With every step I took, the creaking sounds grew louder, and the sense of being watched intensified. Suddenly, I saw a dim, flickering light ahead, partially obscured by the towering cornstalks. My heart raced as I followed the light, my footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. As I drew closer, I realized it was an old, rusted lantern hanging from a wooden post. The lantern illuminated a small clearing in the cornfield, revealing an unsettling sight. In the center of the clearing, a group of people dressed in tattered, dirty clothing stood in a circle. They were facing inward, their eyes closed, and they held hands. It looked like some sort of ritual, and I couldn't help but shiver at the sight. The people were muttering something in hushed tones, their voices barely audible over the rustling of the corn. I strained to make out their words, but it was a language I didn't recognize, filled with guttural sounds and strange inflections. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched, unsure of what to do. Should I approach them and ask what was going on? Or should I slip away quietly and leave this bizarre scene behind? Before I could make a decision, one of the figures in the circle suddenly opened their eyes and stared directly at me. The eyes were wide, unblinking, and filled with a malevolent intensity that sent a chill down my spine. I knew in that instant that I had to get out of there. I turned and sprinted back the way I had come, the cornstalks seeming to close in around me, their rustling now a deafening cacophony. I could hear the people behind me, their voices rising in a strange, haunting chant. My heart was pounding, and I felt like I was being pursued by something far more sinister than I could comprehend. I burst out of the cornfield, gasping for breath, and made a beeline for my car. I sped away from Milton Farm, never looking back. To this day, I have no idea what I stumbled upon in that remote cornfield, and I don't think I want to know. The countryside, once a symbol of serenity, now holds a dark secret that still haunts my nightmares. Second story, by Sarah Thompson. Growing up in a small farming community in Nebraska, I was no stranger to the eerie tales and legends that circulated among the locals. But one story, in particular, sent shivers down my spine, and it happened during my teenage years. One balmy summer evening, my friends and I decided to explore the vast cornfields that bordered our town. The fields were rumored to be the hiding place for something sinister, though no one could agree on exactly what that something was. We were intrigued, and the thrill of adventure outweighed our fear. The cornfields stretched out for miles, and as we ventured deeper into their shadowy depths, the cornstalks towered over us like silent sentinels. The golden evening light filtered through the leaves, casting long, eerie shadows on the ground. As we pushed deeper into the field, a strange, low hum filled the air. At first, we dismissed it as the wind rustling through the corn, but it soon became apparent that the sound was unlike anything we had ever heard. It seemed to resonate in our chests, creating an unsettling vibration. We pressed on, curiosity and unease battling for dominance. That's when we stumbled upon a clearing in the cornfield, and what we saw there made our blood run cold. In the center of the clearing stood an old, decaying farmhouse, its windows shattered, and its doors hanging ajar. The place looked abandoned, yet there was something undeniably wrong about it. As we approached the farmhouse, a voice echoed from within, a chilling, ethereal chant that sent shivers down our spines. We exchanged nervous glances, but the lure of the unknown pulled us forward. Inside, the farmhouse was filled with a sickly, sweet smell that made our stomachs churn. The source of the odor became apparent as we entered what appeared to be the living room. An old, tattered couch sat in the center of the room, and on it lay a decaying, desiccated corpse. Its skin was stretched tight over its bones, and its eye sockets were empty, as if something had devoured its eyes. We stumbled back, horrified by the grisly sight. That's when we heard footsteps approaching from behind. We turned to see a man, his face gaunt and twisted, standing in the doorway. He wore a tattered, blood-stained shirt, and his eyes held a madness that froze us in place. Without a word, he raised a rusted knife and lunged toward us. Panic overcame us, and we fled from the farmhouse, the man's deranged laughter echoing in our ears. We ran through the cornfields, the strange hum now a deafening cacophony that filled our heads. We could hear the man behind us, his footsteps drawing closer. We dared not look back, but we could feel his presence like a shadow, an entity of pure malevolence. As we burst out of the cornfield and back into the safety of our town, we realized we had narrowly escaped a nightmare. The legend of the farmhouse in the cornfields had become a terrifying reality, and we were left with a chilling tale to share with our fellow townsfolk. Third story, by Emily Lewis. The sun was setting over the rolling hills of Kentucky as I made my way down a narrow country road. I had recently moved to the area, and I had a fascination with the countryside. I'd often drive aimlessly, exploring the picturesque landscapes and the charm of small-town America. Little did I know that one evening, I would stumble upon a scene that would haunt me for the rest of my days. As I turned a bend in the road, I noticed a sprawling cornfield that seemed to stretch on forever. The golden stalks rustled in the breeze, creating a mesmerizing wave that beckoned me to investigate. Curiosity got the best of me, and I parked my car on the side of the road before making my way into the field. The cornfield was immense, and the sunlight was fading rapidly. I felt the weight of the encroaching darkness, and couldn't help but be on edge. I knew I should turn back, but something kept me moving deeper into the field. As I ventured further, the cornstalks seemed to grow taller and closer together, casting the path ahead in an unsettling twilight. The air was heavy with a sense of foreboding, and a low, mournful wail carried on the wind, like the distant cry of some lost soul. My heart raced, but I pressed on. That's when I saw the dim glow of a lantern in the distance. It was a small light, but it promised a respite from the encroaching darkness. I quickened my pace, drawn to the light like a moth to a flame. I reached a small clearing in the cornfield, and there, a chilling sight greeted me. A group of people, their faces obscured by tattered clothing and hoods, were gathered around a large, smoldering fire. They chanted in a language I couldn't understand, their voices a discordant, otherworldly chorus. As I watched in dread, they seemed to be engaged in some dark ritual. Symbols were etched into the earth around the fire, and the flames danced in unnatural patterns, casting eerie shadows on their faces. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my feet were frozen to the ground. One of the figures broke away from the circle and approached me. I could feel their eyes on me, though their face was hidden by a hood. They raised a hand, and I saw that it held a gnarled, twisted root, as though torn from the earth. With a slow, deliberate motion, they thrust it toward me. I stumbled back, terror clawing at my throat. It was then that I realized the strange sound I had heard was coming from the cornfield itself. The cornstalks were whispering in unison, their rustling creating a haunting, unearthly symphony. It was as though the very earth beneath me was alive and conspiring with these sinister figures. I turned and ran, the lantern light and the chilling chant fading behind me. The cornfield seemed to twist and contort, its paths shifting, trying to disorient me. Panic set in, and I could hear the group pursuing me, their footsteps a relentless, ominous drumbeat. I burst out of the cornfield and back onto the road, gasping for breath. I knew I had narrowly escaped something inexplicable and malevolent. The cornfield, once a symbol of rural beauty, had become a place of darkness and dread that I could never forget. Fourth Story, by Michael Johnson. It was the summer of 2018, and I was taking a cross-country road trip with my college buddies. Our journey took us through the heartland of America, and as we passed through Indiana, we decided to explore the countryside. That's when we stumbled upon a farm that would forever change our perception of the peaceful rural landscape. The farm, which bore the name Meadowbrook Farm, was nestled far from the main road, surrounded by vast cornfields. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden hue over the fields and the picturesque farmhouse. It looked like a scene from a postcard, and we couldn't resist the allure of its charm. We parked the car and made our way toward the farmhouse, our laughter echoing in the quiet countryside. The fields of corn rustled gently in the breeze, creating a soothing backdrop to our exploration. As we approached the farmhouse, the feeling of unease began to creep over us. The place was old, with peeling paint and creaky, weathered wood. It looked abandoned, yet there was something off about it. The windows were dark and empty, as if they were hiding some dreadful secret. We decided to venture inside, against our better judgment. The moment we crossed the threshold, we were met with a bone-chilling sight. The interior was in disarray, furniture overturned and shattered glass scattered across the floor. But what drew our attention was the writing on the walls. In seemingly haphazard, manic scrawls, phrases and symbols covered every surface. We couldn't make sense of the writing, and the symbols appeared foreign, like some ancient language we'd never seen before. The air inside was heavy with a damp, oppressive atmosphere, as though the very walls were haunted by the words written upon them. We couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, and this sense of dread intensified as we ventured further into the house. That's when we heard it, an eerie, high-pitched laughter that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Panic set in, and we rushed out of the farmhouse, desperate to escape the oppressive presence within. As we burst back into the open air, we noticed that the cornfield surrounding the farm had taken on an eerie quality. The rustling of the corn seemed to mimic the chilling laughter that still echoed in our ears. We made a hasty retreat to our car, our hearts pounding, and a sense of unease clinging to us like a shroud. As we pulled away from Meadowbrook Farm, we couldn't help but wonder what had transpired within its walls. The picturesque countryside had revealed a dark secret, leaving us with a tale of eerie laughter and unsettling symbols that still haunts our memories. Fifth Story, by Charlotte Edwards. In the rolling hills of Vermont, I found myself embarking on a journey through the tranquil countryside. It was early autumn, and the colors of the leaves were beginning to turn from vibrant greens to fiery reds and oranges. As I drove down winding, isolated roads, I couldn't help but be captivated by the rustic charm of the area. Little did I know, I was about to stumble upon a place that would shatter my idyllic view of the countryside. I came across a farm with a sign that read, "Whitewood Farm," and it beckoned to me like a siren's call. The sprawling cornfield adjacent to the farm seemed to stretch out endlessly. It was nearly twilight, and the setting sun cast long shadows across the cornstalks, creating an eerie, enchanting ambience. I parked my car and ventured into the cornfield, the rustling leaves echoing in the stillness of the evening. The beauty of the landscape was undeniable, but an unsettling feeling gnawed at me as I moved further into the field. The cornstalks grew taller and denser, their leaves brushing against my skin like ghostly fingers. The shadows deepened, and the sense of isolation became suffocating. I couldn't help but feel as if I were being drawn into a world that existed on the periphery of reality. As I pressed on, I noticed a faint glow in the distance. A dim, flickering light that held an inexplicable allure. I couldn't resist its pull and followed it, even as my heart pounded in my chest. The light led me to a clearing in the cornfield, and what I saw there was a scene that defied explanation. In the center of the clearing, a group of people clad in tattered, white robes stood in a circle, their eyes closed, and their faces turned upward to the sky. In their midst, a large, ornate mirror stood, its surface reflecting the waning light of the day. The people were chanting softly, their voices a haunting, ethereal melody. The words they spoke were unfamiliar, a language that seemed to belong to some ancient, forgotten realm. Their chants grew louder, and the air around me seemed to crackle with a palpable energy. I was rooted to the spot, unable to tear my gaze away from the mirror. It held a mesmerizing quality, and I felt as if it were drawing me closer, beckoning me to step through its surface and into another world. Just as I felt myself being pulled toward the mirror, a jolt of fear surged through me. I couldn't ignore the nagging voice in my head that told me to run, to flee from this inexplicable and ominous scene. I turned and dashed back through the cornfield, the voices and chants growing distant behind me. The cornstalks seemed to close in on me, their rustling now a dissonant cacophony that filled the night air. I could feel the group pursuing me, their footsteps a menacing drumbeat. I finally burst out of the cornfield, gasping for breath and drenched in sweat. I never looked back, but the memory of Whitewood Farm and the enigmatic mirror it held still haunts me to this day. The countryside, once a symbol of peace and serenity, had revealed a dark and mysterious side that I could never forget. Sixth Story by Daniel Carter. Nestled in the heart of the Texas Hill Country, I found myself exploring the countryside near a small, forgotten town called Rosewood. The area was known for its picturesque landscapes, and I had always been drawn to its rugged beauty. However, one fateful summer afternoon, I encountered something that defied the tranquility of the countryside. The sun was high in the sky as I drove along a dusty, winding road, passing by endless fields of wildflowers and gnarled oak trees. It was the kind of place that seemed untouched by time, a sanctuary of simplicity and quiet. As I turned a corner, I caught sight of a vast cornfield that stretched out as far as the eye could see. The golden stalks swayed in the gentle breeze, and the sight was so serene that I couldn't resist the urge to stop and explore. I parked my car on the shoulder and made my way into the cornfield, its rustling leaves whispering secrets to the wind. As I ventured deeper, the sunlight grew dimmer, and the air became heavy with a sense of foreboding. An eerie unease settled over me, but curiosity kept me moving forward. The cornstalks seemed to close in around me, forming a labyrinthine path that twisted and turned, making it easy to become disoriented. The rustling leaves sounded like soft, distant whispers, and it was as if the field itself was trying to tell me something. I soon came upon a small clearing in the cornfield, and that's when I saw them. A group of people, their faces hidden behind masks, stood in a circle, their hands raised toward the sky. In the center of their gathering, an old, gnarled tree stood, its twisted branches adorned with peculiar ornaments and charms. The people chanted softly, their voices filled with an eerie, otherworldly quality. I strained to understand the words they spoke, but it was a language I couldn't decipher. It sent shivers down my spine, and I felt like an intruder in a strange and unsettling ritual. My heart pounded as I watched, unable to tear my gaze away from the scene. That's when one of the figures broke away from the circle and turned to face me. Their mask was adorned with intricate patterns and dark, hollow eyes that seemed to pierce into my soul. With a slow, deliberate motion, the masked figure extended a gnarled, skeletal hand toward me. The hand held a small, weathered book, its pages filled with cryptic symbols and ancient writing. The figure began to speak, and I felt a strange compulsion to approach. Just as I was about to take a step forward, an icy bolt of fear shot through me. The desire to join their strange ceremony was overwhelming, but I knew I had to resist. With all the strength I could muster, I turned and ran, the cornfield seeming to close in around me. The people behind me began to chant in a more urgent and menacing tone, their voices echoing in the stillness of the field. I burst out of the cornfield, my heart racing, and didn't stop until I reached my car. As I sped away from Rosewood, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped a dark and malevolent force. The countryside, once a haven of tranquility, had revealed a sinister underbelly that would forever haunt my memories. Seventh Story by Rachel Mitchell. I had always been a city person, but a new job opportunity in the rural outskirts of South Dakota compelled me to move away from the bustling metropolis. My first few months in the countryside were serene, as I adjusted to the slower pace of life and the charm of the rolling fields of crops. However, one peculiar incident changed everything for me. One chilly October evening, I decided to explore the countryside around my new home. The setting sun cast a warm, golden glow over the endless cornfields. I had always been intrigued by the seemingly unending rows of corn, and I was eager to take a closer look. I parked my car by the side of the road and ventured into the cornfield. The rustling of the leaves created a soothing backdrop to my exploration, and the crisp autumn air filled my lungs. I felt at peace as I meandered further into the cornfield. As I continued, the corn stalks grew taller, their leaves brushing against me like a whisper from nature. It was then that I noticed the eerie silence. The usual sounds of chirping birds and buzzing insects were conspicuously absent, as if the cornfield itself had fallen under a strange, unnatural hush. The path through the cornfield seemed to lead me deeper into its labyrinthine heart. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right, that I was no longer alone in this rural oasis. I felt watched, though there was no sign of anyone around. The growing sense of unease was compounded by the distant sound of eerie chanting. The voices were low and ominous, like a haunting, ancient ritual. My curiosity warring with my fear, I followed the sound to its source. In a small clearing in the cornfield, I came upon a chilling sight. A group of people, dressed in tattered, mud-stained garments, stood in a circle. Their eyes were closed, and their heads were tilted upwards, as if they were in a trance. In the center of the circle lay a grotesque, lifeless scarecrow, its arms outstretched in a menacing pose. The people chanted in a language that sent shivers down my spine. It was like nothing I had ever heard, filled with guttural, discordant sounds that seemed to claw at my soul. Their voices grew louder, and I couldn't tear my gaze away. Suddenly, one of the figures opened their eyes, and they bore into mine with a chilling intensity. I could see the madness in those eyes, a malevolent force that transcended the natural world. I felt like I was in the presence of something far more sinister than I could comprehend. My heart pounded, and I knew I had to get out of there. I turned and fled, the cornstalks seeming to twist and turn, attempting to trap me in their maze. The chanting behind me grew louder and more urgent, a relentless pursuit that fueled my terror. I emerged from the cornfield, gasping for breath, and scrambled into my car. I sped away from the countryside, my mind filled with a dreadful curiosity and an overpowering sense of foreboding. The rural landscape, once a symbol of tranquility, had revealed a dark and mysterious secret that I would never forget. Eighth Story, by Samuel Anderson. It was a crisp, autumn day in rural Ohio, and I decided to take a drive through the picturesque countryside to enjoy the vibrant fall foliage. The rolling hills were covered in shades of red, orange, and yellow, and the air was filled with the earthy scent of fallen leaves. But my scenic drive took a chilling turn when I stumbled upon a forgotten farm and its unsettling secrets. I had been navigating a network of narrow, winding roads for hours, and the sense of isolation was palpable. The fields of corn that lined the roadside seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. The sun was descending, casting long shadows over the landscape, and I couldn't help but feel a growing unease. I came across a faded, weathered sign that read, "Maplewood Farm." It was an invitation to explore, and curiosity got the best of me. I turned onto the gravel road that led to the farm, eager to see what lay beyond. As I approached the farm, I noticed the eerie silence that enveloped the place. The farmhouse and barn were in a state of disrepair, their paint peeling, and their windows dark and empty. It was as if the farm had been abandoned, but something about it felt undeniably wrong. I parked my car and made my way toward the farmhouse, my footsteps echoing in the stillness. The air was heavy with a sense of foreboding as I crossed the threshold. The interior was in shambles, with broken furniture, shattered windows, and debris scattered across the floor. It was as if a storm had ravaged the place. I couldn't help but feel watched as I explored the decaying farmhouse. The feeling of dread intensified when I reached what appeared to be the living room. There, in the center of the room, was a sinister sight. A circle had been etched into the floor, and strange symbols were drawn within it. A flickering candle, its flame casting dancing shadows on the walls, sat at the center. As I stared at the circle, the temperature in the room dropped noticeably. I could see my breath, and a chill ran down my spine. I had the unsettling sensation that I had stumbled upon a place where something unholy had occurred. Just then, I heard a creaking sound, like the slow, deliberate movement of something heavy. I turned to see the door leading to the basement standing ajar. My heart raced, and I hesitated. Should I investigate further, or should I make a hasty retreat? My curiosity got the better of me, and I descended into the dark, oppressive basement. The air was thick with a musty, moldy smell, and the only light came from a dim, flickering lantern. My footsteps echoed eerily on the wooden stairs. In the basement, I found an unsettling sight. A series of eerie, life-size dolls were arranged in a circle, each with empty, soulless eyes that seemed to follow me as I moved. They were dressed in tattered, blood-stained clothing, and their faces bore expressions of anguish and torment. I could no longer ignore the overwhelming sense of malevolence that hung in the air. With a shiver of fear, I turned and fled the farmhouse, my heart pounding in my chest. The feeling of being pursued, of unseen eyes watching, clung to me as I made my way back to my car. I drove away from Maplewood Farm as quickly as I could, my mind filled with images of the sinister circle and the haunting dolls. The countryside, once a symbol of serenity, had revealed a disturbing secret that would forever haunt my memories. Ninth Story by Benjamin Turner. The countryside of North Carolina was always a place of serenity for me. Its rolling hills and wide open spaces provided a stark contrast to the hustle and bustle of the city. But one fateful summer, I discovered that even the most peaceful settings can hide something sinister. One sweltering day, I decided to take a leisurely drive through the rural landscapes of North Carolina. The sun beat down on the fields of corn, turning the landscape into a shimmering sea of green and gold. I had no particular destination in mind, just a desire to soak in the beauty of the countryside. As I meandered down a quiet country road, I passed by a farm that seemed out of place. The sign by the entrance simply read, Blackthorn Farm. The farm itself was shrouded in an eerie stillness, a stark contrast to the vibrant fields that surrounded it. I parked my car and ventured onto the farm's property. The air was thick with the scent of hay and the buzzing of insects. As I approached the farmhouse, I noticed its crumbling, decaying facade, as if it had been abandoned for years. Yet something drew me closer, a sense of foreboding mixed with morbid curiosity. Inside the farmhouse, I found a scene straight out of a horror story. Cobwebs clung to every corner, and the rooms were filled with broken furniture and rotting floorboards. But what truly chilled me to the bone were the strange symbols and drawings etched onto the walls, as if the house itself had become a canvas for madness. The air inside grew heavy, and I could hear faint, ominous whispers, like the distant voices of the long departed. The voices seemed to echo from the walls themselves, a chorus of the past that sent a shiver down my spine. As I continued exploring, I came across a room that appeared to be the center of the disturbing occurrences. In the center of the room, a circle had been drawn on the floor with intricate symbols and candles surrounding it. I couldn't decipher the purpose of this strange ritual, but the feeling of darkness that emanated from it was undeniable. I was about to turn and leave when a strange sensation washed over me. It felt as though I were being watched, that eyes were trained on me from the shadows. A chill ran down my spine, and I turned to see a figure standing in the doorway. Their face was obscured by a mask, and they held an ornate, rusted knife. With a slow, menacing step, the figure approached me. Panic seized me, and I turned and ran, the creaking floorboards and the sound of my heart pounding in my ears echoing in my wake. I burst out of the farmhouse and made a hasty escape to my car. As I sped away from Blackthorn Farm, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to me. The countryside, once a symbol of peace and solitude, had unveiled a malevolent secret that still haunts my thoughts to this day. 10th Story, by Laura Williams. The countryside of Virginia had always been my escape from the stresses of the world. The endless expanses of rolling hills and lush greenery provided the perfect backdrop for peace and solitude. But during one unforgettable summer, I discovered that even the most tranquil places can hide unsettling mysteries. It was a sweltering July afternoon when I embarked on one of my customary drives through the rural landscapes of Virginia. The cornfields were a sea of vibrant green, and the sun bathed the countryside in a golden hue. I followed an old, narrow road that seemed to wind endlessly, taking me deeper into the heart of the countryside. As I ventured further, I felt an increasing sense of isolation. The only sounds were the chirping of crickets and the gentle rustling of leaves. It was as if the world had fallen into a profound stillness, a silence that sent shivers down my spine. I passed by a weathered sign that simply read, "Greenwood Farm." Something about it piqued my curiosity, and I decided to take a detour to explore the farm. It was a place of rustic beauty, with an old farmhouse, a dilapidated barn, and an expansive cornfield that seemed to stretch out forever. I parked my car and ventured onto the farm, the crunch of gravel underfoot the only sound in the eerie quiet. The farmhouse appeared abandoned, its windows dark and empty, as if it had been forsaken for years. Yet I couldn't resist the pull of the place and decided to explore its interior. As I stepped into the farmhouse, I was met with an unsettling sight. The rooms were in a state of disarray, as if someone had left in a hurry. Broken furniture lay scattered, and the walls were adorned with a collection of strange drawings and symbols that I couldn't decipher. The air inside grew stifling, and the heavy scent of something unidentifiable hung in the air. I felt as though I were intruding on a place that held an unknown secret, and the weight of that knowledge pressed down on me. I was about to make a hasty exit when I heard it, a faint, eerie humming sound coming from deeper within the farmhouse. It was a sound like no other, a haunting, discordant melody that seemed to resonate with the very walls of the place. My curiosity overcame my unease, and I followed the sound to its source. The humming led me to a small, dimly lit room, where an old phonograph sat on a dusty table. Its needle scratched against a record that played an eerie tune, its notes filling the room with a chilling melancholy. As I listened, a sense of dread washed over me. It was as if the music held a power over me, pulling me further into the room, further into the farmhouse's enigmatic grip. I could feel the weight of something unseen, something that lingered in the shadows. Suddenly, the door to the room slammed shut, and I was plunged into darkness. Panic set in as I fumbled for the doorknob, but it seemed to elude me. The eerie melody grew louder, and I could hear faint, disembodied voices whispering around me. In that moment, I knew I had to escape. With all my strength, I threw my weight against the door, and it finally gave way. I stumbled out into the blinding sunlight, gasping for breath. I drove away from Greenwood Farm, my heart racing, the unsettling experience still fresh in my mind. The countryside, once a sanctuary of serenity, had revealed a haunting secret that would forever haunt my thoughts. Thank you for watching whole video. Check this video you see on the screen, it's one of my favorite. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and smash that like to support my free and daily content for you. If you enjoyed this video, drop a comment and tell me what story got you chills.